The Russian Revolution of 1917, a dive into the chaos. Join me as we dive into the chaos of the Russian Revolution of 1917 and try to unravel what really happened during those turbulent times. This was not a single event, but a seismic explosion of pent-up fury that shattered an empire and forever altered the course of world history. In this exploration, we'll dissect the key events and factors that fueled this monumental upheaval, setting the stage for the birth of the modern world's first communist state. The rot within, an empire on the brink. At the dawn of the 20th century, Russia was a paradox. It was a massive, sprawling empire that presented a facade of grandeur and imperial power to the world. Yet beneath the gold leaf and the authority of the Romanov dynasty, the country was rotting from within. The social, economic, and political issues were not just piling up. They were creating a powder keg waiting for a spark. Socially, Russia was a feudal anachronism in a modernizing world. The nobility and the wealthy elite, comprising just over 1% of the population, controlled a staggering majority of the land and resources. On the other side were the peasants, who made up over 80% of the population. Emancipated from serfdom only in 1861, they still lived in abject poverty, burdened by redemption payments for land they felt was rightfully theirs, and struggling to make ends meet on small, inefficient plots. In the growing industrial cities like Petrograd and Moscow, a new class of urban workers faced equally grim conditions: long hours, miserably low pay, dangerous work, and overcrowded housing. Economically, the nation was in shambles. Widespread poverty and extreme inequality were endemic. The government's attempts at industrialization, while successful in creating a large proletariat, were haphazard and did little to improve the lives of the common folk. Inflation ran rampant, eroding the meager wages of the workers. The lack of modern infrastructure, particularly railways, made distributing what little food and resources there were a logistical nightmare, a problem that would soon have devastating consequences. Politically, the system was utterly bankrupt. The Russian monarchy, led by Tsar Nicholas II, was an autocracy resistant to any meaningful reform. Nicholas, a man who believed he was ordained by God to rule, was profoundly out of touch with the suffering and aspirations of his people. He relied on a corrupt and inefficient bureaucracy and the brutal oppression of the Okhrana, secret police. To maintain control, the people had no democratic outlet for their grievances. The Duma, a weak parliamentary body created after the 1905 revolution, was routinely ignored and dissolved by the Tsar. The people were hungry for change, and their discontent was palpable. They were fed up with the autocratic rule, the endless wars, and the general sense of injustice that permeated every aspect of their lives. The spark, the February Revolution. The seeds of revolution had been sown for decades, but it was the catastrophe of the First World War that provided the catalyst for explosion. Russia's entry into the war was a disaster. The army, though large, was poorly led, under-equipped, and suffered staggering casualties. Millions of men were killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. On the home front, the war effort crippled the economy. Resources were diverted to the front, leading to severe food and fuel shortages in cities. The railways, overwhelmed by military logistics, broke down, preventing food from reaching urban centers. By February 1917, marked by the modern Gregorian calendar, the people's patience had run out. It began spontaneously on International Women's Day, as women textile workers in Petrograd took to the streets protesting the bread shortage. They were quickly joined by thousands of other workers, and soon the protests swelled into a general strike. The cries of bread were now joined by shouts of "down with the autocracy" and "end the war." The authorities responded as they always had, with brutal force. But this time it was different. When the Tsar ordered the garrison to suppress the protests, the soldiers, many of whom were raw conscripts who sympathized with the protesters, mutinied and sided with the revolution. This mutiny of the Petrograd garrison was the critical moment. Without the army's loyalty, the monarchy was doomed. Within days, the situation had boiled over completely. Facing universal defiance and advised that he had no support, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated the throne, ending over 300 years of Romanov rule. The false dawn, the provisional government, and the rise of the Bolsheviks. The February Revolution was a stunning popular uprising. In its wake, a dual power structure emerged. The official authority was the provisional government, formed by liberal politicians from the Duma. Simultaneously, the Petrograd Soviet of Workers' and Soldiers' Deputies, a democratic body representing the masses, held the real power, as it could command the allegiance of the workers and the mutinous soldiers. This new provisional government, however, was weak and ineffective from the start. It was unelected and lacked legitimacy. Crucially, it made two fatal errors. It decided to continue Russia's participation in the deeply unpopular World War, and it postponed land reform and other sweeping social changes until after a constituent assembly could be elected. This was a disastrous miscalculation. The people in the streets and trenches wanted peace and land now. This failure paved the way for a small, radical, and disciplined party to seize the initiative, the Bolsheviks. Led by the fiercely intelligent and determined Vladimir Lenin, who was rushed back into Russia in a sealed train by the German government, who hoped he would destabilize Russia, the Bolsheviks were a minority but knew exactly what they wanted. Lenin's genius was in his simple, powerful slogans that spoke directly to the people's deepest desires: peace, land, and bread, and all power to the Soviets. While the provisional government preached patience, the Bolsheviks promised immediate action. They would end the war, give the landlords land directly to the peasants, and hand all power to the socialist Soviets. Lenin's charisma and strategic thinking, combined with the organizational skills of Leon Trotsky, made them a powerful force. Throughout the summer and autumn of 1917, their support among the soldiers, workers, and sailors of Kronstadt grew exponentially. The climax, the October Revolution. By October, the Bolsheviks had gained a majority in the Petrograd Soviet. Lenin argued the time for talk was over. It was time for insurrection. On the night of October 24-25, 1917, they acted. The Bolsheviks' Military Revolutionary Committee, led by Trotsky, efficiently and almost bloodlessly moved to seize key strategic points in Petrograd: bridges, telegraph offices, railway stations. The climax of the October Revolution was the storming of the Winter Palace, the seat of the increasingly impotent provisional government. Contrary to later Soviet myth-making, it was not a bloody pitched battle. The palace was lightly defended by a few cadets and a women's battalion, and it fell easily to the revolutionary forces. The provisional government was overthrown with minimal resistance. The next day, Lenin stood before the Congress of Soviets and announced the transfer of power. He declared the establishment of the world's first socialist state, founded on the principles of Soviet rule. The Bolsheviks' takeover marked a significant and brutal turning point in Russian history. It was not the end of the revolution, but the beginning of an even more brutal civil war that would solidify the new regime's authoritarian character. The lasting legacy. The Russian Revolution's impact was immense and immediate. It led to Russia's withdrawal from WWI via the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, redrew the map of Europe, and inspired both hope and fear across the globe. It provided a blueprint for revolutionary Marxist movements worldwide, leaving a lasting legacy that defined the ideological struggle of the 20th century during the Cold War. The chaos of 1917 gave birth to a new, powerful, and terrifying force that would shape the course of society and politics for decades to come.